Now, a guy called Manning Marable. Manning Marable is a professor at Columbia University. He is the leader of Movement for a Democratic Society, and this is what he says about Barack Obama. He wrote this in a British Trotskyist publication in December 2008. What makes Obama different is that he has been a community organiser. A lot of people working with him are indeed socialists with backgrounds in the Communist Party or as independent Marxists. There are a lot of people like that in Chicago who have worked with him for years. Now, Manning Marable wouldn't say that on national TV, but he will say that to his fellow Marxists. So when we talk about Frank Marshall Davis as being an influence on Obama, that's just the start of it. As Cliff points out, if he talked about his mentor, Frank Marshall Davis, and said, oh, that was a long time ago in the past, I've repudiated those ideas, that was just youthful, silliness, we would understand. But this is just the first stage of a pattern that continues until this very day. He is still working with the same people. The same people are still supporting him. Nothing has changed, only the levels have basically gone up. Now, as I mentioned before, the committees of correspondence was a key breakaway from the Communist Party USA. It's very strong in Chicago, very strong in San Francisco. Van Jones was connected to the San Francisco branch. Barack Obama was very, very close to the Chicago branch. I have a membership list. I have a list of the 1994 members and contacts list for the Chicago Committees of Correspondence. On that list are people like Alice Palmer, Danny K. Davis, the current congressman out of Chicago, good friend of Obama's, the Klonskys, all of the Klonskys, Carl Davidson, a good friend of Barack Obama. There is also Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dawn. There is also, I'm just trying to think, but the other key point is there are two people on that. There is a guy called Mick Kelly and there's a guy called Joe Eisbaker. Now, both of those guys were also members of what's called the Freedom Road Socialist Organisation. It's a hardcore Maoist group that works inside the Democratic Party with the Democratic Party to promote radical socialist ideas. It is also connected to there's a meeting of world communist parties held annually in Belgium under the auspices of the Belgian Workers' Party. Now, Joe Eisbaker, one of these guys, has represented the Freedom Road Socialist Organisation at that meeting. Now, what is significant is that when the FBI raided several premises just recently, Joe Eisbaker was one of the key people interviewed, as was Mick Kelly, who is now in Minneapolis. So you've got basically the networks are still in operation. The networks are still in contact with all sorts of radical communist groups around the place. Joe Eisbaker and his wife Stephanie Weiner were also key members of the Chicago New Party in the early 1990s, a party that Barack Obama joined, a party that was set up by the Committees of Correspondence, Democratic Socialists of America, ACORN and SEIU. We are told it was a moderate, non-socialist party, yet it had hardcore Maoists like Joe Eisbaker working within it and several known communists, socialists and Marxists. So the point I'm getting at is that, if you're in a network marketing organisation, you might be at the bottom of the downline. And you may not even know the upline, the people at the top, but you are busily beavering away for somebody up there who has set this organisation up, who is making a lot of money out of you while you're beavering away at the coalface. So Barack Obama is he's not in the top of that upline, but he's a fairly long way up. But he is part of a network that is still existing, that is still supporting terrorist organisations, that is still working with communists, and which, if you really follow the uplines right to the top, is almost always connected to either the Soviet Union or Cuba. So that's the point I'm making. This is not a domestic situation. This is not just a left-wing movement that has taken hold in America. This is a left-wing movement that has got key people who have strong connections with intelligence agencies and groups that are connected with foreign powers that are hostile to this country. Now, that is why I echo Larry Grathwohl's call for the re-establishment of the House, of Senate and Congressional subversive committees, because we have to start getting some of these people on record and start unravelling these things. I'll take Van Jones, for example. A good question to ask Van Jones is, have you ever been to Cuba? Because Storm, the organisation he helped lead, was only about 20 members strong. In 1996, 6 leaders of that organisation travelled with the Venceremos Brigade to Cuba. And we know from Larry Grathwohl's testimony that the Venceremos Brigades have been used to recruit spies and terrorists over its entire existence since 1969. So you've got 6 leaders of Van Jones' organisation, which was 20 members strong, went to Cuba that year. Now, I don't know if Van Jones was one of them, but I know if I put Van Jones on the stand with his hand on his heart and asked him, there could be some very interesting answers. You could also subpoena the records of the Venceremos Brigades and find out who all they send 140 people there every single year and have done for 40 odd years. You would find a lot of very interesting names on that file, who you would then find would be connected to all sorts of organisations. Some would be very prominent in the Democratic Party, some might be very closely linked with certain senators and congressmen. So the point I'm getting at here is, and some people ask me, why do I do this? Why would I bother about America? I'm living in New Zealand. But as Ronald Reagan said, this is the last best hope for humanity. If your economy tanks so far and you go so far down that you can no longer maintain your military spending, your military might, you're not going to live in a vacuum. There's not going to be a vacuum. The Chinese, the Russians, the Cubans, the Iranis, all those countries that hate America will take their chance. And that is what I believe is really behind this. This is not just to, making America's economy falter. This is designed to bring America to its knees to the point that you can no longer stand against the enemies of freedom in this world.